Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast. We have Ed Shlepetskyy. Edward Shlepetskyy is with us today. He's CEO at Active.eu, Forex UiPath MVP. So he's an automation guy. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about Ed's time in the army. He's a cold water swimmer. He's also a boxer. So him and I share lots in common. He's in Bratislava. So I think he's my first guest ever from there. I'm currently in cold Montreal, minus 15 Montreal. It's 5 degrees where Ed is. So it's still cold. We're going to talk about automation today. We're going to talk about Ed running his company and possibly the future of automations. And yeah, Ed's background's quite fascinating. So let's dive right into it. But before we do, this pod is presented to you by podpar.com. That's my podcasting company. If you want to start your own pod, you can go to podpar.com. We help you monetize and scale your podcast the unconventional way. So, Ed, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself, your background, what you're up to nowadays.
Charles, thanks a lot. I look forward to this episode. So, yeah, as mentioned before, I'm actually originally Ukrainian. So I grew up in Ukraine, and then at the age of 18, I moved to Slovakia, to Bratislava, where I am currently. Speaking of the military background, I wasn't in the army directly. It was a military college, which is something I have experienced in the age between 15 and 17. And it is a military structure where you study, so you have your regular subjects as a math, physics, etc. But also at the same time, you have all the military stuff around. You live there 6 days a week. You have a military routine. There, it is only for a guy, so we had no girls in there. And you have also a military structure in a way that there is an hierarchy. So meaning like there are guys responsible for other guys. So, and we had the structure in there where you could be responsible for 10, 30, or 120 people depending on your rank. So me during the first year, I was responsible for 30 people, and going to the second year at the age of 16 and 17, I was later responsible for 120 age mates, guys, which are built very same in terms of that physical condition, in terms of mental condition. So it is one of the most artificial environments I've been through. I enjoyed it a lot, and this is one of my first leadership experiences in this early age of 15 to 17. Then, yeah.
So, why do
Then
you
after,
say artificial? Yeah,
when I say
artificial.
artificial, when I say artificial, I mean that usually at work you have boys, girls, men, women, you have a different age people, etc. When I say artificial, maybe I meant artificially selected environment in a way that there you are the closest with your peers in terms of sampling. So you are the same age, same physical abilities, because there was a physical selection, and also the intellectually. So this very selected environment where never in my life before, because at school you usually go with the boys and girls, there are teachers, etc. And also afterwards at work, I was in usually in more diverse environment. There it is like artificially selected with environment with physically trained, mentally well prepared young boys. And also most of the teachers, they were like officers in there. So it is quite a, I would say, unique and interesting environment to be through, which has some cons and pros. That age, I believe I will never find my girlfriend because I'm losing, in quotation marks, all the skills being surrounded just by guys, but later it all worked out. So yeah.
And okay, how did you get there? Did they selected you? Was it a meritocracy or?
My father convinced me that it is a good idea to be military guy, especially in Ukraine. Looking at Ukraine these days, I mean, I can't imagine where I would be if I would continue this career. But back then, my father was the hospital driver, and he wanted to give me everything he missed. And military guys, they have earlier retirement packages and all this kind of stuff. So he convinced me. It was my decision at the end, influenced by a father. I spent there 2 years, and then later I decided not to continue in the military. I decided to go for something else because it was, first of all, too predictable area for me. Like you knew what salary it will be in 5 years, 10 years, 20, etc. And secondly, we are still in Ukraine. Like back then, there was many processes were quite heavy on corruption, and I understood that for me to continue the career, my parents would need to pay, as well as I would not be able to have a job while studying in military, because it is not unlike in any other university where you can work in McDonald's or something like that. There you are 24/7, you are actually there in the military stuff. So I would not be able to make money for myself, and it would mean for me another 5 years of a bit suffering.
And then how did you get into RPA and all that automation stuff?
So when I turned 18, I moved to Slovakia. I didn't speak Slovak back then. I didn't speak well English, and I went for my first job was a postman. And then after a postman, I was actually applying for a different jobs. I always dreamed of getting into one of the corporates, and one of the corporates who gave me an opportunity back then was Henkel. It is a German company, and there actually the reason I was hired was mainly because I was speaking Ukrainian and Russian, and it was in demand for insourcing the processes in there. So I got the job, and I don't think that I got the job because of my any of the fantastic skills, but mainly because of the language skill. But there I quickly realized that I'm doing quite manual and repetitive stuff. So after a few months, I started to think of how could I optimize it. I learned programming a little bit before myself, and then I started to apply my programming skills at the work itself. So I started to code the first macros, and then from the first macros, actually, I started to go to code more robust robots. And once Henkel decided to go to create their own automation team, I was offered to be a first member of the team, actually. So this is how I started in the automation, which is my job since 2014.
And what kind of automations do you do nowadays? Because you've been at the helm of your own company since 6, 7 years now.
Right.
Are all your processes automated? What does it look a day in your life, a day at the office?
Oh, actually, we are automating processes for other companies. So not all of my processes are automated, and some of my processes I even don't want to be automated. So some of the processes I do enjoy doing myself. But when we speak about the automation, we speak about the digital automation. So we are creating virtual robots or assistants which can literally mimic any of the human actions within the PC, within the laptop. So we can automate any application and as well as any website. So all this manual, repetitive, boring stuff that people do in offices, especially in the back end, doesn't matter if it is in finance, in sales, in supply chain departments, etc., in HR, we are automating for them. So this is what I'm doing professionally since 2018. I have a team of 40 people behind me, and this is our main focus. And nowadays, of course, also with the AI, we are enriching. If before we created the hands which are able to execute the work, now we enable those hands with the brains through AI.
Who do you target generally as clients?
Usually it is a mid and large enterprises. It is for the smaller enterprises, it is a little bit a different niche and segment, but usually we work with the mid and large enterprises in the different industries. We are quite heavy in manufacturing, we are quite heavy in the financial sector, in the healthcare sector, and there in those sectors, actually, we help those mid and large enterprises. We help to get more efficient. We usually start with the back offices because there is always a lot of manual and repetitive stuff. But these days, we are also getting more and more into the core processes of the company. So, for example, helping to optimize the research process for the biotech companies, etc. So we are getting not only optimization of the manual repetitive stuff in a backend, but also helping to automate the core processes, especially with the AI integration.
Right. And how do you sell? Is it cold outreach, is it ads, or is it referrals? How do you get your new?
I would say that a bit of everything. It is easier to answer what works better. I always see and observe that what works the best are the references. We cannot compete and outperform in quantitative perspective. So there are always the bigger companies who can deliver the resources from all sides of the world. But where I believe that we are competitive is in quality. And once you do the good work for one customer, they usually share the references with the other potential clients. And this is what helps me to grow fast. And another one is that we are growing naturally. So meaning that we are not involving any investors. I see a benefit behind having investors in the company, but I also see what are the disadvantages in there. It can often affect the culture. It can often bring the turbulences in the business itself. And I prefer, as we already survived this startup phase, I now prefer to more grow naturally and still get company on completely different level with our own resources.
Now, your company, what are your main objectives this year as the CEO? What are you focusing your time on?
So we are doing, there are two main aspects. So speaking of quantitative, we are opening two new markets. One is the DACH region, so it is Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. Another is US. So my big focus is this year on launching on the US market. I'm planning to relocate in the second quarter of the year. I will be more present in the US. So quantitative wise, like growing in terms of revenues, customers, and also employees, it is launched in these two geographies. Speaking of qualitative, we have new, very interesting strategy deployed in the company, and this is yet more on the slides and yet just getting materialized. So by the end of the year, I would consider this year as a successful year if the strategy would actually live in the company, but not live only on the slide. So implementing the strategy which we define. And the third is more, I would say, the personal one, because the challenges of the CEO and founder, especially on the earlier stages of the company, is that CEO is doing everything. So I have my personal goals of more and more building the operations in the companies in a way that my goal is to make myself redundant in a company and fully replaced by ideally more talented and smarter people than I am. So this is what I'm working on. And if I work 1 or 2 hours less on the end of the year, I mean, the weekly or daily, that would be a great achievement as well.
And what will you do with that extra time? Take care of your son?
Oh, there are plenty. I think that I can spend a great time with my family. I can spend more time in sports. I see the direct correlation between how I feel mentally and how much sports do I do. So for me, it is a must-have to spend time in sports, as well as, to be honest, I have many other ideas. I can easily imagine myself starting other businesses under Active umbrella, which I would then convert my already existing experience into getting those companies further. So I don't dream about having this off-work life that one day I will be just lying on the beach, etc. So what I live is already like joyful life. I like working, and I would just see where I can bring the most value. So
What business ideas do you cherish nowadays?
there are many opportunities in automation in AI area still, and one of the businesses which I'm actually implementing now is we acquire one smaller healthcare organization here in Slovakia, which had quite a mess in the backend in the operations, and with having an amazing tool of being able to automate the operations, I just deploy our guys from Active to clean up a little bit the processes in this organization and actually be more efficient. So the second company is doing is it is an online service for the blood tests and also for the visualization and interpretation of the blood test results. And I can imagine in a similar way acquiring other businesses which doesn't have necessary to do much with the technology, but then making them more efficient on the back end and or keeping them or selling them further. So because the instruments which we have in our company of making businesses efficient doesn't have to necessarily work only for our clients, but I can also imagine making our own businesses more efficient and then, upgrading them and then decide if selling or keeping.
Love it. And how does your pastime of boxing and swimming in the cold waters, how does that make you a better CEO?
Well, not expected this question. So both are more in a hobby perspective than in a business perspective. But what it has in common with the business is, so for example, speaking of the cold water and guys who are doing the cold swimming or ice swimming, they know this magical moment of 3 minutes. Like after 3 minutes, our body adapts. The first 3 minutes when you walk into the cold water, regardless if you are in this ice swimming for, I would say 5 years or 10 years, walking into the ice water always feels the same, and it is always the same suffering. And the trick is not into somehow physically tricking it, but it is in your mind. And after 3 minutes, your body gets adopted, and you adapt it, and then you can carry on with the casual conversations, etc. What also transfers a lot into a business that sometimes, especially when you have the harder times, you just really need to keep going and not to react on this instinctive level that you need to run away or fight or flight, etc. But you just really need to control it in your mind and stay consistent. So this helps me to be consistent, as well as both activities, boxing and ice swimming, really brings me to the ground of like here and now. So I cannot focus on thinking about business, family, some problems or some great stuff related to anything else but myself when I am in those challenging moments. So I need inspirings. I need to focus on my boxing partner, because otherwise I can get the physical damage. And in ice swimming, I cannot choose. It is just that your body tries to survive and run away, and you control it with your mind to stay in this water. So it helps me to refresh a lot. And always after those sessions, I have the huge appreciation of everything I have, starting with the simple things like warm socks and shoes, and up to other great things around me as a friends, family, like warm house, etc.
What's the future of automation and AI? Can a bot spot my own efficiencies and suggest automatic frameworks? How do you see?
I think, first of all, that it is only to a certain extent predictable, because 2 years ago, we believed that, for example, creative tasks would be one of the last that we will be able to replace with the robots. And nowadays, we're seeing, for example, what OpenAI and ChatGPT does. Like we can generate now the images in a second. We can generate very creative stories and the text in a second. And actually, I would say that to a certain extent, it is hard to predict. But what I believe it will be is that, first of all, it would completely change the way we used to work, and it will be much faster than it was happening with previous revolutions like industrial revolution, etc. The main difference here is that nowadays, like if before with the invention of the engine, even if we want a lot and even if we have all money of the world, it would still take time to produce as many engines or cars and give it to every person, etc. Where in digital era, almost everyone has a phone, almost everyone has, or many people have an access to the computer, and the leverage of it and the expansion of this technologies will be much faster than any physical assets. So therefore, we can expect much faster adoption of the technologies, much faster impact on economy, impact on unemployment, impact on other areas where in the long run, I see it very exciting. So I believe that we are heading towards a bright future, but I also expect turbulences on many levels, on the government level, on the enterprise level, and on the individual level, because it will require us to adapt to these fast changes. And it is not easy, like we often prefer to have our comfortable environment, and not all the people are up for, rapid changes, which I see here inevitable. Yeah.
I want to talk about two of your experiences before we finish this off. So one we have in common is like you spent 5 days in darkness. I spent three. That was 2 years ago. What did you learn from that?
I didn't know actually, Charles, that you spent 3 days in darkness. It's an interesting experience. It was self-exploring experience for me, and one of very rememberable takeaway from me was, while being there, you are there without a phone, without any gadget, etc. You actually cut from the entire world, as well as world is also cut from you, so no one can call you and ask whatever they need. And this for me was an experience of the small death, like really dying for everyone. And it made me think of what it would look like if Edward is dying. And if you take ego apart and not think about your importance in quotation mark, I was realizing how fast the world will just move on. And when I say the world, maybe starting with my small world. So I have a very talented, nice little boy, little son, and I believe that I know many people who grow with one parent or with no parents, and they are still okay. So I truly wish and believe that he will be fine. Also, I have a beautiful wife, and I'm sure smart wife, and I'm sure that she would manage well also going forward. And then speaking of company, I could see being there in the darkness. I was thinking about like how my company would end up, and I see still several smart people taking a lead and taking it further to another level, etc. And on the end, for me, it was very relieving and chill acceptance of me that I may die actually any moment. It may happen today, it may happen in 20 years or whatever, but it was very relieving. I was actually somehow tolerating it, accepting it, and I'm not afraid to die. And once you're not afraid to die, like I truly enjoy every day of my life since then. As well as there were a few other, I would say that different and minor benefits as like you tolerate more darkness, you are more comfortable being with yourself for a really really long time. So it is over 5 days without talking to anyone and actually being just in your head. So yeah, it was really enriching and interesting experience, I would say. How about you? Maybe you can share a little bit, like, link to what I say. Do you agree, or what were your takeaways?
Yeah, it was I did like a lot of breath work there and had these deeper meditations. I mean, it's pretty much the same as your experience, right? The sleep, you sleep a bit more, you're a bit bored. I did a lot of yoga. Um, and then I think, yeah, one thing that I didn't do well, so it was insightful, it was interesting, had to be done, but I didn't take the time to acclimate myself. I went out like too quick, and after like had this huge headache when I saw the light. Typical Charles, like no weight and going all in all the time. But yeah, I would recommend to folks that they try it at least. Me, I'm more of a psychedelic guy, and taking the fast route to get to my goals. I'm bold, I'm adventurous. I would recommend that route not to anyone, because if you're scared and you're not accustomed to these things, but me, I'd like reaching higher dimensions faster, because else, I mean, yeah, I need to spend 5 days of your time just to get there. What about your Everest experience? So that was quite special. Tell us about that one too.
Yeah, I mean, it was planned 2 years ahead, and usually I say no to similar opportunities just because it takes a lot of operational time from me as a running the company guy. And my friends told me, "Hey, let's go with us to Everest Base Camp." I say no, but it will be in 2 years. Just block your calendar. And they say, "Okay, interesting." I block my calendars for 3 years. Sorry, for 3 weeks, and then I forget about it because it was 2 years away. And then when the time approached, I realized what I signed up for. So it was like when it was approaching, I start to prepare a little bit, mainly buying the stuff and equipment I need there, etc. And I was questioning myself several times why the hell I at all agreed to this experience. But once I sat in a plane, and then afterwards we sat in a really small plane heading to Lukla, one of the most dangerous airports in the world, then I actually just accepted the trip itself, and I was very distant from my work and everything. There is no signal very often, and it is complete opposite to what I'm doing on a daily basis. So if on a daily basis I work a lot in my head and very little physical, except this boxing training, cycling, or whatever, there you have a lot of physical exercise. You walk all the time. You walk in a perfect, amazing, beautiful nature, and very little is going on in your head. No clients can call you, no colleagues can call you, so you are really isolated there in the moment. Of course, you are exposed to several challenges. Like, first of all, you are walking in freezing temperatures in the day of the summit, because we went to Everest Base Camp, and then our destination was a different. Everest Base Camp is 5.3 thousand meters, and then our destination was Island Peak, is 6.2 thousand meters, with some climbing also. So in a summit day, the warmest temperature, which was around the Island Peak, was around minus 20 degrees, and the coldest one was around minus 30. So it was like really freezing experience. And actually, on the way up to the Everest Base Camp, most of the hotels, called it in quotation marks, it is only called a hotel, but it is like you sleep on a wooden bed, in your jacket, in your sleeping bag, and everything. So it was quite out of the comfort zone physically, but I find it very comfortable mentally to be in such environment. I am not the biggest fan of the mountains in a way that I say, okay, now after this I want to conquer all the other mountains around the Himalayas or all the 8,000 mountains or something like that. But I can imagine returning there for another experience, and most likely it would be going there again with my son. So I can imagine after he's growing up in a teenage or closer to 18, going to the mountains again with him. Maybe it will be the same like Everest Base Camp. Maybe it will be something else, but I would be happy to co-experience these challenges with him.
Let's climb Everest together. So I have a couple of CEOs that are down too. So let's organize that. Would love it. Till then, Edward, where can we find out more about?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again? I
Yeah,
didn't
where
get it. We
can
had
we
the
find
connection
out
problem.
more? Where can we find out more about you on?
I would definitely. Thank you for asking this, Charles. I would be keen if people get in touch with me over the LinkedIn. So there, I am quite often on, and I'm happy to respond any questions, any messages, and just stay in touch. As well as, if more professionally, if people decide to go for automation and digitalization journey with us, and experience the really qualitative approach in automation, you can go to activeautomation.com or active.eu. Just a big disclaimer here is that active is spelled with the E at the very beginning. So active.eu.